Prabhupada's preaching tactics were special. I mean, first of all, Prabhupada had a very clear vision of what he was going to do regarding India, which he did not reveal, but which he had a clear conception about. How we left India was quite a story in itself. It was about July, I believe, July of 70, and I was in Paris. Prabhupada had sent me to Europe to organize our temples in London and Paris and Hamburg. At that time there was no GBC, but he put me in charge to coordinate the temples there. So I was in Paris and I suddenly got a telegram. Your letter, 26th July, come Los Angeles immediately. I was on a plane that same day. I just detached myself and I got on a plane and went to Los Angeles. So that was quite a time, because it was the time of, our four sannyasis in our society there was some difficulty in their understanding of how the movement was to be run. So Prabhupada was very, very disturbed, because he had detected that there had been some poison which had come in terms of belittling his position, which had come from some of his godbrothers in India. So I came in the evening, and then the next morning Prabhupada called me, having heard I'd come, and he called me and he was very grave. And he looked very shriveled almost. And he looked up to me, and he just had a little spotlight on his table, desk lamp. He looked up and he said, "Have they told you?" And I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." He said, "Can you take me out of here?" I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." He said, "Where will you take me?" So I thought, and I said, "Well, I could take you to Florida." I said, "It's not far enough." I said, "I could take you to Europe." He said, "The poison has spread there as well." Then I said, "Then where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go to India." And because Prabhupada was going to India, I wanted to be where Prabhupada was, so I said, "I'll be the GBC of India." So that's how I got to go with Prabhupada. And we went to Japan. And I'm telling you how Prabhupada's preaching strategy. When we went to Japan, Prabhupada stopped there and he got picked up by Dinapan in two very first-class chauffeured limousines. And we stayed there for about a month. And Prabhupada's purpose, maybe 2 weeks, Prabhupada's purpose was to negotiate printing contract for books for which to start the Life Member program in India. But at the time we didn't know that. He ordered Krishna Book Volume 1, Krishna Book Volume 2, Nectar of Devotion, I think Teachings of Lord Chaitanya perhaps, and 2 Back to Godhead issues, 32 and 34 I believe it was. And he gave $5,000 down. How Prabhupada, it was an excellent way in which Prabhupada negotiated with Dinapan. The first meeting we had with the whole group of members of Dinapan, the top chairman down, they all came and very formally they presented their cards to Prabhupada. I think the story is told in the Lilamrita. They all presented their cards and then they left, and Prabhupada was left with one, the number 7 man to just show us off at the end. It was like a whole ceremony. It was like a tea ceremony, but we drank water. They drank tea. They were on one side of the big oak desk, and we were on the other. So Prabhupada had a word with the man before we went to the limousine, and he asked the man, "What is, your goal?" And of course Prabhupada had been given these calling cards by each of them. "My name is so-and-so. My name is so-and-so." So the man took all the cards and put them in a row, up and down, and he was number 7. When Prabhupada asked him what his goal in life was, he took the card number 7 and went like this. And Prabhupada shook his head and laughed, and then he really, started to preach to this man about the nature of life and how temporary it was, and that was not the purpose of life. So Prabhupada was a real transcendental negotiator. He had me be the heavy man, And Dinapan would give a price, and I would say it's impossible, and I'd give this ridiculously low price, and they would just practically start crying. It was so ridiculous, the price. And then we would get into a big argument, and Prabhupada would just sit there in a neutral position, and finally he would act as if he was the arbitrator. And he'd say, this is not good, this should not be quarreling like this. He said, I will settle it. He said, neither side should argue like this. We must consider both the needs of each side. And he would pick the price that he wanted, which was still extremely low, but by that time they would just think that, Prabhupada was their savior. And in this way we went through all of the prices of each book, and Prabhupada got very low contract prices.
So like this, Prabhupada was doing so much transcendental negotiations. And then the most amazing thing of all is that Prabhupada had no money. He only had $5,000 at that time. But somehow he managed that they would give him credit of $50,000 worth of books just for the $5,000 that he paid them. And they did that, and that was the basis of our credit, which allowed us to begin the printing in large quantity of the books. So it was a very successful meeting. After the negotiations, Prabhupada invited all of these men to his little house, this paper house, and we cooked a big feast for them. And they especially liked the pakoras and samosa. They said it reminded them of their tempura that they like to eat as a fried thing, which they eat. They liked it very much. Prabhupada oversaw their serving, and he saw that they were satisfied. Prabhupada explained that if you make someone take prasadam in your home, that person remains a friend for your whole life. He becomes obligated. This is a scientific and Vedic fact, that if you can offer prasadam to someone in your home, he said, whenever a guest comes, you must make them take prasadam. He says, when they do that, they become your friend. So he invited them all, and they took prasadam. We can always remember this. Actually, Prabhupada wanted that in each of our temples there always be an arrangement that up to 10 to 20 people can at any time come in the door and get fresh hot prasadam. So, of course, we don't have so many people coming in yet, but that time will come, and it will be necessary for the temple managers to manage in such a way. There are temples in India like that, where you go and at any time, day or night, you can get nice prasad. So, Prabhupada liked Tokyo very much. When we would take a morning walk, sometimes the old ladies, as soon as they saw Prabhupada, they would bow down from the waist. And Prabhupada said, this is a really pious place. He said, this means these people have religion within them, because they can immediately recognize a saintly person. Actually, wherever Prabhupada would walk, people would recognize him as a saintly person. Even we used to walk in New York. There they didn't bow down in New York or anywhere. They would just say good morning to him. As soon as they saw him, they say good morning. Prabhupada said, now they're making advancement. They're wishing a saintly person to have a good morning. This is very good. They'll make advancement. So a devotee is an ocean of mercy. Just by his being Krishna's representative, all the pious people advance spiritually, and all the demons go down faster. Everybody makes advancement in one direction or another due to the presence of the pure devotee of the Lord.
So then we went to India, and Prabhupada, of course, had the entire plan of the Life Membership Program. And as soon as we got there, Prabhupada revealed it. And this was a brilliant plan. He made life members with the promise of giving them these books. And he took from them 1,111 rupees, which was, in those days, purchasing power worth $1,111. And he did it all on the basis that we will provide you these books. So this is how he began the preaching program in India.
So, I remember when we went to India, we arrived in the Calcutta airport. Actually, we came on a plane, and Prabhupada suggested to us that why don't you do kirtan in the plane? So we said, really?
Prabhupada said, yes, do kirtan. So we asked the stewardess, and I believe they allowed us to use the announcement thing, It was a big jumbo. So we did kirtan right in the plane. And then we distributed prasadam coming from Tokyo to Calcutta. And in the Calcutta airport, we arrived in the middle of the night practically. It was 11:30, 12. And there was huge reception organized by Achyutananda and Jayapataka. They were the only ISKCON devotees in India. And I remember they gave about 100 garlands to Prabhupada. Just like today we gave so many garlands. And you know how the garlands go over the head? That there's so many garlands that they cover the head. So that happened again and again. So many garlands were given that we had to keep taking the garlands off of Prabhupada. And then we got into the car. It was our first experience of driving in India. I was sitting in the front seat and Prabhupada asked me, Tamal Krishna, how do you like this? And I said, it's very scary. He said, don't worry, they know how to drive, nothing will happen. So then, at one point, the hosts had arranged for the car to stop and they were going to bring us dap, coconut water to drink. So they stopped the car, and but they somehow couldn't get it completely coordinated, Someone was coming out of the house. We waited about 5 minutes, and finally we decided to go. And then I looked out the window, and the person was running from behind with the coconut, running to catch up. But he didn't do it. So when we arrived, we were staying in one house that was a new house. The owner had not yet moved in. Sometimes in India this would happen with us. We would go. The owners would like us to live. They wanted Prabhupada and his disciples to bless the house by staying there first, before they would stay there. So the house would be like prasad and be purified by a saintly person coming there. Anyway, when we got there, Prabhupada's sister Pishima, we called her, she was there and she had cooked. And she cooked a very big dinner, feast. And Prabhupada, we all sat in his room, and he insisted that we had to finish everything. It was in the middle of the night. By then it was at least 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock. He said, you have to eat everything. She has cooked it all personally, and you have to finish it all. So we stuffed ourselves. And then we went to sleep. And Pishima was very nice, even though she was in her 70s. And actually she was a pure Vaishnavi. But she would sleep. I mean, you can imagine, some of you have elderly mothers. Here was a lady, very, very, Prabhupada came from a very good family, and she was in her 70s and a pure Vaishnavi. But at night, she would just lay down in the hallway and sleep. And the halls didn't have carpets. It was just, floor. She'd put a chadar on the floor, and she'd lay down and go to sleep. Didn't go anywhere. All the rooms were occupied by the sannyasis, and she just slept in the hallway. So humble. During Prabhupada's last year, when Pishima came to also look, there's so many nice stories if you've read the Lilamrita, how she was Prabhupada's younger sister. Prabhupada would describe how they would go kite flying, and Pishima would hold the what do you call it? Yeah. So even when they were small children, she would assist Prabhupada. And in the last year, when she came to be with Prabhupada in his final months, she always considered herself to be impure. She would carry a bottle of Ganges water with her. And anywhere that she sat, after she would get up, she would sprinkle the Ganges water to purify it from her presence, because she considered herself contaminated. So everywhere she would just sprinkle Ganges water. So she stayed there cooking.
Pishima was adored and even worshipped, especially by the lady devotees. One time we were going in procession from Calcutta to Mayapur, and Pishima was in one of the rear cars. And then she got out, and all the women rushed in. They were doing. And Prabhupada said, "What are they doing?" I said, "Well, Srila Prabhupada, they have respect for her, as they do, in a way, for you." He said, "Why? What is that? What has she ever done? She's just an old lady. What has she ever done?" So when Prabhupada was, in his final days, she went to Prabhupada, and I was just amazed. She put her hand on Prabhupada's heart, just like a sister would do, loving sister. She put her hand on Prabhupada, and she was crying, and she put her hand on Prabhupada's heart, and she started to chant the Nisringa mantras for protecting Prabhupada. It was so touching. And then one day, Prabhupada said, just before this, Prabhupada said, that she wants to cook for me. So I said, "What will she cook?" And he said, "Whatever she cooks, let her cook and serve it to me." So Kirtananda Maharaj was there, and he was like, the senior person. He said, "Prabhupada, you cannot eat what she cooks. She's going to cook everything in mustard oil." Prabhupada said, "Whatever she cooks, it's all right, doesn't matter." So Pishima cooked his kachoris, which was, Prabhupada was called Kachori Mukha, one whose he used to be called Kachori Mukha, one whose mouth and face is always full of kachoris. So, we brought in the kachoris, and Prabhupada, at this point Prabhupada could only drink liquids, right? Prabhupada started eating kachoris. He ate everything she cooked. And everybody thought, that's it, Prabhupada may leave his body. No problem.
Prabhupada had us then go out and knock a kirtan. He said every morning you go out at 6 o'clock and you chant in the neighborhoods of this area to do kirtan. And then we introduced, Achyutananda actually introduced Guru Puja at that time. It was the first time we did Guru Puja to Prabhupada. It was in Calcutta, in that apartment, in that house. Prabhupada said we could do it, and every morning we started to do it. Otherwise we had never done it. So, after some time we went to Bombay, and in Bombay many devotees had come. Prabhupada asked me to call about 30 devotees, so they came from different countries. Mostly America they came, different places in America. So many leading disciples of Prabhupada came to join him for the India Yatra. And we went to we did a number of programs. First program was one Sadhu Samaj. So many big Mayavadis spoke, and everybody was just getting bored. And then Prabhupada told us, now do kirtan. And when we did kirtan, all the foreign devotees and Saraswati, the little girl, dancing, all the sadhus got up and walked away. But the people, there were about 5,000 people on Chowpatty Beach, they loved it. Started clapping, and they got out of their seats and they went forward and they were dancing with the devotees. So they liked it so much. Then Prabhupada only spoke 2 or 3 minutes. They had all spoken for an hour. He spoke only 2 or 3 minutes because as far as he was concerned, the kirtan, they had words, but he had actions. His actions were, everybody could see, he had brought foreign people to India, and it was clear from the way we did kirtan that it was not just a show, but it was authentic, because the kirtan was very powerful and everybody was moved to get up and dance. So Prabhupada didn't just waste time with words. He felt that this kirtan and the foreign devotees doing this kirtan was more proof than anything. So he just said, you must be wondering what I have done. He said, I didn't do any magical thing. He said, the mistake you're making is you think that Krishna is a Hindu god and he is only for Indians. He said, but actually he's the soul of all souls, and he's the supreme lord of all beings. And therefore it is natural for everyone to worship Krishna. And actually it was the first time I don't think anyone ever said like this to them. Because really they didn't think this way before. So, other people had presented, that like Vivekananda has, gone to the West, but where was anybody? No one ever brought back genuine, authentic devotees of Krishna who were through and through devotees. That was never done by anyone else before. This was the first time, and all the newspapers gave very big coverage in Bombay. Then Prabhupada did programs in different homes. I remember he did one in the house where we were staying, 74 Marine Drive. It was a house of a man named Kailash Chaksharya. And we did a program on the roof, and Prabhupada gave a lecture that day, and he quoted this verse, taking a straw in my teeth, I simply pray to you. You are all very learned gentlemen with so many good qualities. This. He said, you're all very highly qualified gentlemen. You're all very well educated, but I simply now request you, whatever you have ever learned, whatever you have ever heard, simply forget it. And now take the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I remember it was so powerful. The lecture was such a powerful lecture where Prabhupada was appealing so much humbly, begging, and then at the end he said, now, so I pray to you all, now forget everything I've ever heard. He was praising them like anything, and then finally he said, now forget it all, and just take the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then he began to praise Lord Chaitanya.
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Dayaka Ramore Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Dayaka.
And his whole idea was to start the life membership program based on books. He would take donation and he would give books. He never wanted us simply to take donation, but he always wanted us to give in return books. He always used to say, we're not beggars. We are selling our books. So, the problem is the books didn't arrive because there was a strike in the port of Calcutta. So the books got held up. So we were making all these members promising that we're going to give you books. And we only had these 2 sets of display copies. And we were making so many members and taking so much money. So it was got to be a very, very big predicament. And finally, Prabhupada told me, now you just have to go and get these books. So I went to Delhi, and I had, you can imagine, what did I know, a foreigner going to India for the first time. I had to go to Delhi, and I went and met with one of the central government ministers who controls all the ports of India, that they had to release, because of port strike, dock strike, you can't get anything off the ship. And so I got him to agree to write a letter from the central government saying that this cargo of books has to be released off the ship. So fortunately Delhi was near Vrindavan, so I got to go to Vrindavan. So I remember I went to Vrindavan, and I went to Raman Reti. And I went to this ashram. It's pretty amazing, because I stayed in the ashram that was just across the street from Krishna Balaram Mandir. And I remember the first thing, we went right to where that Krishna Balaram tree is, behind. And Gurudas and I were there, and he said, now you're supposed to roll in the dust. So we're just rolling around. And I remember after that, Prabhupada was in Surat, so I went to Surat to tell him to report, and I told the devotees I went to Vrindavan, because they hadn't gone to Vrindavan yet, and they said, what was it like? And I said, oh, it's a spiritual world. There's no way to explain what it's like. So, we were looking for land in Vrindavan. That's why we could go there for 2 days. We were still in Bombay, and Prabhupada, after staying at this one man's home for 3 weeks with 20, 25 devotees, every morning he would hold programs, and every evening. Then we had to move, and we started to move from one home to another. It's not easy to find places where they'll put up people's homes, where they can put up a guru and 25 or 30 disciples. What to speak of Western disciples who are, like this man told me later, I went to see him, and he still remembered how much it cost him. Especially he remembered the cost of the cashew nuts. Because the devotees, we were used to living very simply in the temple. Prabhupada would tell us 6 chickpeas, you're allowed to eat 6 chickpeas, you're allowed to do this. But we went to India, the hosts were just, you're supposed to feed the guests. So we were all like little deities, eating and eating. And the man ran up a phenomenally high bill, it was like 90,000 rupees he spent on us. He said, in those days, that was 1970. We were eating so much cashew nuts, everything, So after a while, he suggested that, we should give the mercy to some other person. So we moved. And then we started moving from one home to another. Prabhupada did a very nice program in Sumati Maharaj's Scindia house. That was a very good program that he did. And I remember it was a very hot day and we had to drive. At this time we were living in a place called Chembur, which is outside Bombay. It was a Sitaram Mandir. And we came driving in. It was so unpleasant that Prabhupada got, he practically got sick going there because it was so hot and there was no air conditioning. It was just an ambassador car. So we went into the program and did a very good program. And then that night, Prabhupada got sick. And he started to moan. And he was like, I thought he was going to pass away. I didn't know what would happen. So finally, like he was practically, he just said, bring me rose water. So then he drank rose water. And by drinking rose water, he recovered. He just sat up and he became normal again. So I thought that was very miraculous how Prabhupada could do that. So we lived there for some time. Then Prabhupada traveled to Surat, and then he went to Amritsar, to Punjab, and did programs there. Then he came back from Amritsar through Delhi. And then when he went from Delhi onward, the train stopped, and he just told 4 devotees to get out of the train. Actually, one man came to him at the train station, who he had been writing to, and said, "There's really, you should have a temple here." So Prabhupada chose 4 disciples, and he told them, "Take your luggage and get off the train." So all of you, it's so hard to even get you to come to the temple, except you come once a week or twice a week, but you can understand how surrendered these devotees were. That Prabhupada would just order them. I mean, they didn't have any, whatever they owned, they had in their suitcases. And he would just say, okay, off. And one of them was a householder, married man and woman, and 2 brahmacharis. And he just ordered them off the train. This man will find a place for you to stay, and you open a temple here in Delhi. So after some time I went to Delhi. We went back to Calcutta and then to Delhi. I was recently with my godbrother Tejas Prabhu, and we were discussing how practically most devotees cannot understand what it was like to establish our movement in India in the beginning. And Tejas was remembering how when he came to India, I was in Delhi, and I was establishing our center there in Delhi. And
the situation was that he was remembering how not only did we not have cars, not only did we not take taxis, but we didn't even take scooters. That I was insisting that everybody would go on the bus. And we'd have to go out at least a half hour early by 7 o'clock in the morning and just wait so that we could be the first on the bus simply to get a seat to go into New Delhi, because we were living out in Old Delhi, Delhi 7. And the place that we were living in was a dharamshala where they used to hold marriages. And all day long we would go into the city and just make members and get ads for our souvenir for the Pondo program that we were putting on. That was going on 7 days a week. And then we would come home at night. And 3 nights, every week, for 3 nights, there would be marriage ceremonies. And in India, that's a very big affair with bands. And they bring a horse up, and the man rides up on the horse, and there's these huge bands going. And, that's all starts in the evening. And the place we were staying in was built in such a way that the inner courtyard of it was not a very big place. I don't think it was bigger. The entire size was only a little bit bigger than half of this temple room squared. And it was 3 stories high. And in the middle was a courtyard. So the rooms around the courtyard were all very narrow. And in the courtyard, in the bottom, they would cook. And they always used to cook onions and all of these terrible things. And all the smells would go up the courtyard and out. And we were on the 3rd floor. Somehow the mayor of Delhi had given us this place to use for free, so we were saving money by staying there. And all of they'd start in by 7, 8 o'clock with these bands cooking their horrible food. And then on the outside of the building, because it was a marriage, they used to have these running lights, which are blinking lights. And they'd string them up and down along the windows. And there was no way you could block, and all night all you'd see is these flashing lights. And that would go on till 1 or 2 in the morning, 3 nights a week. And I remember we would just, somehow we'd go up on the roof, and we'd go to sleep there, and when we'd wake up, there was at least 30 or 40 people sleeping all over the roof, including on top of us from the marriage party. Everybody was just drunk, and we'd have to, somehow climb out from beneath the bodies, take our bath, early in the morning, have Mangal Arati, go through the morning program, and then out the door, to go out on Sankirtan. And, it's really different than nowadays someone joins in Bombay or somewhere and they have, they have posh arrangements. It's very much easier. No one can understand, not only in Bombay, but anywhere in the world, no one can understand the austerities that Prabhupada insisted upon from his disciples time and time again. When we went to the Kumbh Mela, we were living, it was very awkward. We were living in Allahabad because the Ganges River there dries up at that time of the year, January, I think the month of Magh. And but it's very cold and wet. I mean, it's at least, say, 40 degrees. It can get down that cold, and it's very wet because you're living inside of a riverbank, which has been dried up, and you're living in a tent, and we lived there 25 days, I think. And Prabhupada insisted that everybody go to Mangal Arati. I remember I used to go, I think I was practically the only one that would go to the Ganges. I would always take my bath in the Ganges before Mangal Arati. You have to go walking down, in the whole place. There's no toilets or latrines. I mean, in other words, what did we know about life like this? But this was what Prabhupada insisted on. So, one could argue so many things about all of this, that this is really not very beneficial for my spiritual life, that I should be engaged in more direct preaching. I mean, you can say it's direct preaching, but anybody that has gone to collect advertisements for a souvenir, especially in Delhi, it's not really very direct preaching.
There are a lot of things that the people are not very much, at that time, were not so much interested in hearing spiritual life. Somehow you had to just be able to get them to give a donation. But the result was wonderful. The result was that by collecting all these donations, we were able to pay for putting on the Pandal in Delhi, in which went for 10 days, in which we invited many, many important guests, and which at least 10 to 20,000 people from Delhi got to hear Srila Prabhupada speak, and got to hear kirtan, and so many it took prasadam. So the result is that our movement was given tremendous publicity and a great push forward in the capital of India. But all of that, those 10 days were paid for by 3 to 4 to 5 months of tremendous struggle on our parts. So we never considered that this is indirect preaching, because we could understand very clearly what the purpose which we were working for. We always had that before us.
Prabhupada was just moving from one city to another, like Hyderabad. That was just a big program we did there, big Pandal program. And that where you saw Prabhupada with the chadar over his head and the devotees dancing. Prabhupada, they had a drought there for many, many, many months, and it couldn't rain. And then when Prabhupada did this kirtans, within 2 or 3 days it started to pour rain. And all the newspapers said that what the Pandits could not do in Tirupati, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and his Western disciples have done. All the newspapers picked up on it, and they understood very clearly what it was. That this was something miraculous, and they said that there's somehow or other what the Pandits could not do in Tirupati with all of their mantras, this personality has done. So Prabhupada was just going place to place. Then we went to Kumbh Mela. It was Magh Mela, 1971. And we went on the train. That was very nice. Sometimes we got to ride with Srila Prabhupada on the train. This time we rode in a first-class car with 4 of us. And I remember Prabhupada, at that time, it was the morning time. We were all taking breakfast. And he saw somebody cooking pakora on the train platform, So he told us, get me some pakora. So we said, but what is it cooked in? We don't know what it's cooked in. Prabhupada just said, make him cook it in front of you and then take it immediately. So then we took it, it was very hot, and Prabhupada said, if you eat it when it's very hot and it's cooked in front of you, you can digest it. No, it doesn't matter what it's cooked in. He said it won't make you sick. And we were all eating nice prasadam together. Prabhupada, I remember the servant was serving Prabhupada. And Prabhupada told him to eat also. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, now we're eating like this, don't worry about it. So even though he was eating, he was also serving Prabhupada. Prabhupada wanted him to do this. I got also the chance to be with Prabhupada once in a train in a coupe, where it's just 2 up and down. So Prabhupada slept on the lower berth, and I slept on the floor. And we both went to sleep, but then Prabhupada's habit was only to sleep 2 hours. So by midnight he woke up, and then he put on the light. So, I got up, I offered my obeisances, and Prabhupada was just chanting japa. And then after a while he ordered me, now go back to sleep. So I had to go, I went back to sleep in front of Prabhupada. And he just stayed up the whole night chanting japa. Prabhupada did not sleep very much. He would go to bed at 10 or 10:30 and get up by 12 or 12:30. And then he would chant for some time, and then he would start translating. And his translation work would go on usually for 2 hours. or 3 hours. Then he would chant more.
That by the grace of Krishna, all the mystic powers of a yogi are present in a devotee if he requires it. Just like Srila Prabhupada. Whatever he required from anywhere, Krishna supplied. He didn't have to separately desire it, but it happened automatically. Prabhupada gave the example, while sitting in the Kumbh Mela, some devotee came and gave Prabhupada rasgulla, made in London. And he was sitting in the Kumbh Mela eating the rasgulla made in London. Prabhupada said that even, the King of England, or even the Viceroy of India, could not do this. Even the biggest person in India during the British Raj, British rule, they could not imagine to get a rasgulla flown in and eat it in India. This is a great joke, because I told the other day, I think it was the British made everyone think that whatever was made in England was better than what was in India. So nobody in England in the old days knew how to make a rasgulla. Rasgullas are from India and from Bengal. But, so Prabhupada's point was that then the British would have thought, and the Indians would think, that a rasgulla made in England is better than a rasgulla made in India. He said, but just see that I can sit in the Kumbh Mela, which is the place of all sadhus, sadhu samaj, where all the sadhus meet, and I'm eating a English-made rasgulla. So, Prabhupada could do this, but he didn't do it by mystic yoga. He did it by bhakti yoga. Because of his loving devotion to Krishna, Krishna gave him so many nice assistants, and one of those assistants made him this rasgulla. Of course, that is just a small example. There's a much bigger example. One time we were in Allahabad after the Kumbh Mela, and one person was preaching the glories of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. And Prabhupada said, what was the special glory? And then the man said that there was one police chief who was a very fallen rascal. And because of Ramakrishna, he gave up his drinking, he gave up his bad habits, and he became, a follower. Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada said, so that made Ramakrishna an incarnation of God, because he could do that? He said, if all that it takes is that you have to convert one person, from his bad habits, and you become an incarnation, then I'm 1,000 and 1,000,000 times more of an incarnation of God than Ramakrishna. Because I have made so many thousands of people give up all their bad habits. But I don't claim to be an incarnation of God. If you want to know what is an incarnation of God, you have to do so much more than simply do that. But certainly, that is a sign of great power, what Prabhupada could do. Therefore, we call Prabhupada that he is empowered with Bhakti Shakti by the grace of Krishna.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschatya Desh Tarine.
To Mayapur, and then in Mayapur we got some land, and by 1972, I think it was, Prabhupada started the construction of our Mayapur project there. So we were moving around all over India.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada, the sannyas, there was a whole issue. Of course, this is described in the Lilamrita to some extent. What happened was that I went to see Prabhupada in Delhi one day, during the Delhi Pandal time. And Prabhupada looked at me once and he said, you should revive your old LA, you should revive your old LA mood. I was thinking, what does that mean, my old LA mood? I couldn't even figure it out. Bali Maradana was saying, I said, Bali, what does Prabhupada mean? He said, well, the only difference between now and then is that in those days, he said, you were a brahmachari and now you're a grihasta. Maybe the old LA mood means, be a brahmachari. So I said, how can I be a brahmachari? I'm married now. He said, anyway, that's the only thing I could figure out what it means. So gradually it came in my mind that, actually my wife was a very chaste person, very chaste lady, and she was very devoted. But being the kind of person I am, I wasn't an easy person to get along with, so I was very critical. And I'd always get on her case, where's the laundry, why isn't it? One day she said, look, I'm not your laundry machine. She said, maybe it's better you take sannyas. Well, she was just, I think I said something like, I can do it better myself. She said, well, then you should take sannyas. But when she said that, somehow, I thought, wow. And it really had an effect on me. But she didn't mean it, of course. And then when we went to Bombay, I started to become very detached, and I just got it in my heart that I want to take sannyas. And she could understand, because a wife can understand these things. So, one day, she said, I'm going to tell Prabhupada that you should not do this. And she ran into Prabhupada, and I ran in after her. And she just, I think she just couldn't speak, and then she offered her obeisances and left the room. We were at Akash Ganga. And every morning then I started to go into Prabhupada during Mangal Arati. Akash Ganga was an apartment on Nepensi Road. And I would sit there, which was very unusual because we were all supposed to be in the temple room, but I would just sit there. And Prabhupada knew exactly what was on my mind. And I would just sit there, and he would sit there. And eventually, you see, because in those days to take sannyas meant you couldn't be a GBC man. When Prabhupada formed the GBC, he gave Madhavisa Prabhu the choice. Either you take sannyas or you be a GBC. There was no sannyasis on the GBC. So to take sannyas meant you have to give up being the GBC. So I sort of started to just develop this mood that I want to be a sannyasi. And when I left, I told my wife, I said, give me my Bhagavatams. She said, why do you want your Bhagavatams? They were personally Prabhupada. These were the Bhagavatams that Prabhupada sold me when I first joined with his own autograph. He autographed all of them. I said, well, I just want to read them. She said, you never read those Bhagavatams, because now we had new Bhagavatams. She said, you never read them. I said, I might want to read them. She knew. So we went to Jaipur. And in Jaipur, I just took shelter of Radha Govinda, Rupa Goswami's deity, and I just thought, now, Govinda Dev, I'm yours. And I started to live outside in the gardens there. And when the devotees would come for programs, because I was the GBC, and I'd always sit right up front, but now I wouldn't even go up front. I would sit outside the room. And Prabhupada would be speaking. He would stay in this little turret room, a round corner room of the gardens of Radha Govinda, right at the Jaipur Radha Govinda temple. And I would not come into the room, but I was just, in this mood of now I'm in a renounced mood. And I'd sit right at the doorstep. And one day Prabhupada was speaking, oh, there's Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And he is very in a very humble mood now. Something like that. And it was, I hadn't taken sannyas, but he used the word Maharaj. So, like everybody's eyes went up, and all the women, who were there, it's like their antennas went up. My wife was not there, but these women were there. All of them who were very good friends of hers. Koshalya was there, and Srimate and Jamuna, and most of them had husbands, and this was not a good omen. That Tamal Krishna was now a Maharaj, was being called Maharaj, and they knew that there was something going on. So during the Pandal program, we had the Radha Govinda from New York. That was the first time Prabhupada worshipped. The way Prabhupada would have a Pandal, we would get Radha Krishna deities, and he would install them. He wouldn't do his installation. He would have them for the worship ceremony in the Pandal. They would preside in the Pandal. Then he would ship them to the West. So this Radha Govinda of New York were worshipped at Jaipur in the Pandal. So at the program one evening, Prabhupada called me over and he said, your wife is also my disciple, and she is a young girl. He said, what can I do? What will happen to her? So I said, Srila Prabhupada, sooner or later I'll take sannyas and she won't be happy. So better that I take sannyas now and she'll get accustomed to it. That was my answer. And it was right in the middle of the slideshow. He called me over. So then after the program, we went back to his room. Shyam Sundar was there. And he said that, so what do you think? And Shyam Sundar, I think you should take sannyas. And Prabhupada said, well, you'll have to get a danda made and you have to dye some cloth. I said, I already got my danda made, and the cloth is already dyed. I was ready. So then Prabhupada said, all right, tomorrow morning I'll give you sannyas. And then the next morning, early in the morning, about 6, 7 in the morning, he lit a fire, just sitting on one side, Prabhupada on the other side, and a few devotees in the Pandal. All the women were practically in mourning. They made it. Actually, the women formed a contingent to go to Prabhupada and convince him not to do this. That it would be too, devastating to Madri. But Prabhupada he agreed. So he gave me sannyas. He said, your name is Tamal Krishna Goswami. He said, this was the first time he gave that title, Goswami. He said, you have given up your big position in the society. You have given up a very chaste wife. He said, so your name is Goswami. So I went out and I was determined, now I'm going to go out. And he said, who will you take as your assistant? I said, no assistant, because they'll engage me in some frivolous talk. I will walk alone. And I had some romantic conception, heroic idea that I was going to be a big sannyasi and travel like this, walking by foot, following Lord Chaitanya's example. So about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes later, Prabhupada called me back and he said, actually, that is not a very practical suggestion. It's not practical. He said, you need some assistance. He said, take some assistance and get some vehicle. And he said, this is not Lord Chaitanya's time. So then my party was, the first party was my assistant, brahmachari was Gukripa, and Yasodanandan, and Panchadravida, and myself. We made the first party. And it was, you can imagine, it was quite a fiery group. It was a very strong group of preachers. And Prabhupada sent me to Ahmedabad, where he had gotten an invitation, but he could not go. And so he sent me there, and on his behalf, and he went to Africa. And when I finished the program there, we had some very good programs. We met about 8 life members, and we had the governor was our chief guest, because the programs had been arranged for Prabhupada. So we came through. The next program that Prabhupada was going to was in Madras. And we stopped, the train stopped from Ahmedabad to Madras, stopped in Bombay. But because my wife was now at the temple and I was a sannyasi, I wouldn't go. So I sent my party to see Prabhupada and give the report. And I just sat in the train station waiting for them to come. It was a 6-hour or something wait over. And then suddenly Yadubar came. And he said, Prabhupada sent me here to bring you back. He said, you can come to the temple. I said, but my wife is there, former wife is there, I can't go, I'm a sannyasi. He said, no, Prabhupada said, it's okay. So as soon as I came into the room and I offered my obeisance, Prabhupada said, the temple is a neutral ground. He said, it is neutral. You can be here at the same time. There's no harm. And then he asked everyone to leave the room, which was quite unusual, I thought. Because Prabhupada didn't generally do that. He asked everyone to leave the room, and he beckoned me over to the table, and he said, now tell me, give me your report. So I gave him a report, and he was so happy about this preaching report, because I had just been a sannyasi. This was his first preaching assignment he'd given me. And after it, he became so pleased, he stood up. And I had offered my obeisances, and he stood up, so I stood up, and he walked around the table, and he just took me in his arms, and he held me very tightly, he embraced me on one side, and then he embraced me on the other side, and he said, now take this sannyas mantra in your heart, and go everywhere and preach. He said, Kirtananda is a sannyasi, Brahmananda is a sannyasi, and you're a sannyasi. Now I can retire peacefully and translate. Go and preach. And I was just, my whole body was so transformed, I felt by Prabhupada's touch, because it was very rare that Prabhupada would use his body so much like that too. And it was a real, I really felt surcharged by that, empowered by that. I remember one time, I thought I had done very well. I went to a city, Tata Nagar, in India, in Bihar. It's known as the steel capital of India. And at the time, we were just commencing the construction of our Mayapur building, the first guest house building, called the Lotus Building. At that time, there were no buildings at Mayapur at all. So I had a traveling party, myself and through 4 others. And we went to this city. And we did some big programs. In fact, we got, mayors and governors to attend the programs. We made some life members. We got huge amount of newspaper coverage. So I sent a full report of all of this to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada wrote back, you have gone to the steel capital of India, but you have not brought any steel back. He said, what is the value of all of these other things? You went to the steel capital. We're in the middle of starting a construction project. We need steel, and you didn't get any donation of steel. So what is the value of what you did? So Prabhupada always, again and again, stressed tangible results.
I've seen it again and again. Prabhupada made very big plans just to drive everyone crazy. Like when he said, publish Chaitanya Chaitamrita, 17 volumes in 2 months. And immediately all the BBT devotees went crazy. For 2 months they were in a state of total madness. They didn't leave their offices. They ate in their office, they bathed in their office, they slept in the office, and they just worked day and night. And in 2 months, 17 volumes. When Ramaswar was given that instruction, he just started laughing. He thought Prabhupada was joking. But Prabhupada didn't crack a smile. And eventually Ramaswar kept looking. I was with him on the walk. And Ramaswar finally said, you actually mean this? And Prabhupada said, yes. And everybody became shocked. And Prabhupada did this again and again. He said so many big instructions that he gave us, and it is practically driving people crazy. This is Prabhupada's great mercy, that we're prepared to do anything. It doesn't matter. Just like I told the story in Hong Kong yesterday, that we're making life members. We had our party, 3 jeeps, and we were in Bhopal, in Madhya Pradesh. And we went to one cinema owner, you see, and he was drunk. He was a drunkard because so many of these cinema people, they're all in that business of drinking. He was drunk, so it was very hot. It was, I think, May. And we were traveling around India in May in open jeeps. We were also mad. But, that was, it was. Anyway, we came to Bhopal and we came to this man. So we said, we want you to become the life member. And he was drunk and he said, yes. He said, but it is too hot to become the life member. No one had ever given me an excuse like that. I thought, this person is not going to be easy to convince because it makes no sense what he's saying. So we were trying to figure out what are we going to do. So he kept saying, it is too hot, it is too hot. So we said, sir, we are also feeling very hot. But we came here on the order of our Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. He wants us to make life members and he wants you to become a life member. He kept saying, it's too hot, too hot. He said, and I know you are very hot. He said, because if I am hot, you people are from the West. What to speak of how hot I am, you must be very hot. So finally he said, I will help you. So we said, you'll become the life member? He said, no, I will cool you down. So we said, the only way you're going to cool us down is if you give us a check for 1,111 rupees. Then we're going to get cool. He said, no. And he put his hand on our head and said, you're very hot, very hot. So finally he said to us that, all right. He said, I will do what you want me to do if you do what I want you to do. So then we said, we'll do whatever you want us to do. If you'll sign the check. But we made him, but first signed the check. Because I didn't know what he was going to do. So he signed the check, but then he put it in his desk. And then he brought over 2 bottles of Limca. I think it was myself and Gargamuni. We were our team. The team was myself and Gargamuni. We went there. So he said, take these bottles of Limca. They're very cold, right? He said, yes. He said, and pour it over your head. Now we were sannyasis. And, it's not a very nice thing to ask a sannyasi to pour Limca. It's very sticky. So we said, what about if we drink it? He said, no. He said, it will not cool you off. He said, you must do what I say. So we took the bottle of Limca, poured it over. So what rule and regulation is this? This is not following any rule or regulation. But because we were mad for pleasing Prabhupada, we can do anything to please Guru and Krishna. And this mood really endears one to Guru and Krishna and gets so much mercy. So, to spread Krishna consciousness, we have to do so many difficult things. And we should be prepared. The greatest mercy will come to those who preach the Krishna consciousness movement, no matter what it takes. And the more you risk, Prabhupada said, the more you attract the attention of Krishna. So, Prabhupada has given us a wonderful vehicle, this Hare Krishna movement, by which we can preach worldwide. Every one of you should take up fully the mission which is assigned to you by your respective spiritual masters. Preach and preach and preach. This is essence. Preaching is the essence of our life. Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will bestow upon you all the mercy that he has personally come to give this world.
Prabhupada had, with great difficulty, set up the, well, first of all, we were living in Hare Krishna in Bombay, but it was under sale agreement. We hadn't purchased. And some of us didn't like Hare Krishna land very much. We felt it would be better to be in the heart of the city of Bombay and not so far away in a suburb. So we set up an office for collecting and making life members. And it was just like a Marwari office, just with almirahs and a gutty and some pillows, It was exactly like all the people that we used to go to visit. So we were very proud and pleased with that arrangement. We brought Prabhupada there. He was staying at Bhagavad Patel's house. And so we showed him. Prabhupada looked there and said, "Where is the temple room?" So, it never occurred to us that there was no temple room there. We thought that the temple room was the office with all the files in it. We said, "Well, there is no temple room." Prabhupada looked very displeased. And then he walked out. He said, "This is not very good at all." Even though we were collecting lakhs and lakhs of rupees, but because it was not according to his desire. He had a plan to develop Hare Krishna land, and he knew that was, of course, in our small estimation, we could not understand Prabhupada's broad plan. So we thought, well, this is a misconceived plan. Prabhupada arranged to finally sew up the land, so to speak. The sale agreement had been canceled by the owner, and Prabhupada somehow got, after 2 years of hard work, got the man to agree to sell. And he had an agreement signed, which is the whole story. But anyway, then he sent myself and Shyam Sundar back to Bombay to finalize and get the conveyance drawn up. So in the process of going back to Bombay, we had 10 days. The lawyers tricked us, and they convinced Shyam Sundar and I that we should cancel the sale agreement. So we did that. So then Prabhupada, I forget which town he was in. He might have been in Pune, but anyway, he hadn't heard from me. He wanted me to tell him. So finally he called. So I said, we canceled the sale agreement. And all I heard was click. He just hung the phone up. And then after that, when I finally saw him, began about a year and a half, Prabhupada. Every time someone, Prabhupada had to work to again get the sale agreement thrown up again, which took about a year and a half. And whenever he'd bring in life members, he would say, "This inexperienced boy has canceled the agreement. Look at this agreement, look at this," and he would show the whole thing again and again and again. He would go through the whole thing. I just have to sit there. But the one thing is that I continued to try and help to, rectify the wrong, whereas Shyam Sundar went off to do his rupee business. He actually lost his Krishna consciousness because of that. After all, it came out all right, and Prabhupada at the end, when it was finally concluded, I remember we signed the conveyance and it was all finished. There was a big feast in honor of, the parties that had sold to us. And I remember everybody left the room after, and Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "That was the best fight of my life." He just smiled at me, and I think I knew better than anyone what a fight was, because it was on my account that so much of a fight was done. So those are very, the anger was just, it wasn't really, it was a resolve. Prabhupada saw me as just a player in the game, so to speak, and an inept player. But the real thing was between himself and Krishna and the material energy, Maya. And despite whatever ineptitude I had, he was greatly determined. Prabhupada was very aristocratic in his dealings. I remember one meeting he had with Mr. R.D. Birla,
R.D. Birla, the Birla family is, of course, was the wealthiest family in India. And R.D. was like one of the most senior Birlas. G.D. Birla, R.D. Birla. And the most pious was Jugal Kishore Birla, but he passed away first. So R.D. was the eldest. And Prabhupada had been communicating with him. So we came to Birla House in Bombay to see him. And Prabhupada was, just like he was like an ambassador of India, I felt. He was like from a spiritual world. He sat with this man. The man had a drawing room, a parlor, that was as big as our, temple room. I mean, vast, very high ceiling. And Prabhupada told him all about his preaching. So then Mr. Birla said, what would you like? And Prabhupada said, I want 500,000 pounds sterling. I want to build a temple in Regent's Park, and I want you to pay for it. The Prabhupada told me when we drove back in the car, he said that when you see somebody like this, you should never ask for something small. Only ask for the proper thing. Other times also he would meet with many people, very, very big persons, wealthy people. But he was always very humble, and at the same time he was very detached. I remember right after living with a very wealthy man in Hyderabad, when we went to that program, we stayed at the biggest house in Hyderabad, Panalal Pitti, the man's name was. But right after that place, we went to Mayapur, and Prabhupada lived in a thatched cottage, and he told us that this is much nicer. He said, this is Brahminical. He said, this is much more pleasing. And he used to prefer that cottage in Mayapur, even though it was very humble and simple. And he knew how to deal with people. He was expert. One time we were driving from Calcutta to Mayapur, and Gargamuni was driving, and I was sitting in the front seat. I always used to talk. I talk with Gargamuni. We're friends, so I talk, and Prabhupada would say, "Stop talking." But anyway, somehow or other, just inadvertently start talking, and sure enough, Gargamuni, was driving, and he was talking, and he hit a farmer while he was driving, and the guy went down on his bicycle, and that was it. And immediately, Gargamuni stopped the car, backed up, and all the farmers ran over and stuck their picks right against the tires, and they started screaming. So Prabhupada was right at the door, leaning out the window and looking at the guy. And he started talking to one of the farmers, and then after about 10 minutes, Prabhupada said, "Give him 5 rupees." He reached and I gave him 5 rupees, and he said, "Drive." And they took the picks away, and we drove away. We looked back, the guy was still. Prabhupada was an expert, Of course I didn't talk after that. Didn't say a word after that. One time Prabhupada would tell me, another thing he didn't like is that I would fall asleep sometimes. As soon as I get in the car, I'd fall asleep. So we were riding in the car, in the back seat, I was sitting next to Prabhupada. And I was just like this. So Prabhupada said, "You are sleeping." So I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, I'm not sleeping." He said, "You were sleeping." I said, "I don't think I was sleeping." He said, "I said you were sleeping, you were sleeping." He said, "Chant Hare Krishna." So I started to chant, and Prabhupada was chanting japa very quietly, and I was going, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare." And then when you how you catch yourself when you stop, and I looked at Prabhupada just chanting. Another time, Upendra was sleeping in the front seat, and he was going like this. So Prabhupada leaned over, and he very gently caught Upendra's sika from behind. So when Upendra went like this, the sika yanked. Upendra turned around, he thought I had done it. He was very angry, It was Prabhupada caught his sika.
Arati Toma Nayana
When I was in Bombay, it was 1974, I had undergone an operation at that time. Actually, in Delhi, I told Prabhupada at the end of 73 that I think I had a hernia and I needed to get an operation. Prabhupada said, oh, my Guru Maharaj had a hernia. And he said, hernia means you must have an operation. It is a mechanical defect and it must be solved by an operation. So when we got back to Bombay, then Prabhupada had one doctor, it was Dr. Patel actually, checked me up and he said, yes, you have a hernia. So he made an arrangement for me to get an operation. When the operation was going on, they gave this anesthetic, they anesthetize you. And I remember I was meditating on Radha Ras Bihari and the Arti. I was just meditating on it, and they said count down from 10 down. I think I got down to about 7, and that was it. Then I had a dream, a very good dream, in which Srila Prabhupada had been called by the previous acharyas to make a report of his preaching mission on this planet. And the previous acharyas were all there. And they asked Prabhupada that, what is your report? And Prabhupada said that he had studied the people of this planet and he had found that they had no capacity for taking any type of austerity, nor were they very capable of studying, and they were not very pious. He said the only thing that so far they seem to be able to do is that somehow they take shelter at my feet. This was the dream I had. And then they wheeled me out after the operation, and when I came in to the room which had been assigned to me, Prabhupada was sitting there. Actually, he had come to the hospital. And he said, I came here as fast as I could. I wanted to stop the operation. He said, because I think you should have had this operation in America. But anyway, now it is there. And it turned out he had come all the way in from Juhu in a jeep, right in the middle of the rush hour to try to stop this operation. So I told Prabhupada about the dream, and Prabhupada listened very intently, and he said, actually, this is so. He said, this is so. So then I recovered gradually by Prabhupada's help. I was shifted to Juhu, and they put me in this very hot tin shed, which was, we used to live in very austere conditions at Hare Krishna land. And the worst part was the old book room, which was just an open tin shed, and that's where they decided to put me. Not open, it was a closed tin shed, so it was very hot. And Prabhupada would stop there, because I couldn't move because of the operation. He would stop there after his walk, before going up to his apartment, after his class, and he would sit down in this old little folding chair, metal folding chair. He would sit with me for about 5 minutes, and just, give me some of his association, because I was feeling a bit forlorn, missing all the classes. I had been to GBC in India for 4 years, and at that time there was no other GBC. It was just one GBC for the whole of India. So I had practically worked 8 to 9 months continually, with Prabhupada, because he'd stay 8 or 9 months of the year in India, and I was his secretary. And now I was sidelined, so he would give me some encouragement. But finally I felt very bad that Prabhupada was having to stop, so I crawled up on someone's back, and they carried me up to his quarter one morning. And then they sort of just dumped me like a sack of potatoes in front of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, you should not have come. You did not have to come. So he had been watching, though, that gradually, he said, he'd watched me talking with Satsvarup Maharaj in the gardens. And somehow, because of this operation, which had taken me out of commission for a while, I got the idea of going back to America, because Vishnu Jan, my old friend, had come to India to take a boat down the Ganges. So when I went to Prabhupada, I said, Srila Prabhupada, I've been here 4 years now. I said, I think I can quote the whole Bombay municipal codes, but I can't quote very many verses from Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada said, that is not very good. I said, I think that maybe I should go back to America. And Prabhupada just listened for a while, and he said, what would you do? I said, well, I could travel with Vishnu Jan. He thought about it, and he said, you should get a van and some brahmacharis and travel and distribute books. Didn't discourage me. So that was his permission for me to go. And by that time, it was really a serious thing because no one of us left India. You know, we had gone there and we were there together, and it was very, very austere all those years. And it was sort of like an unspoken pact, you don't leave India. So my leaving India sort of opened the floodgate for others to also go out, and gradually they all started to travel. So I went and joined Vishnu Jan. Actually, first I came to L.A. Jai Tirtha helped me with a ticket. And it's interesting, I brought with me, when I came to America, I collected some Ganges water and Jamuna water in a little silver vial, and dust from Rupa Goswami's Samadhi in Bhajan Kutir. And these two little vials went on a silver swing, and I got 4 of these. One I brought for Radha Govinda, one for Rukmini Dwarkadish, one for Sri Sri Kishore Kishori, and one for Radha Kalachanji. And so I went temple to temple, and I gave these to be put on the altar. Then I went to Los Angeles, and it was quite a shock for me to be back in Los Angeles, where I had been in charge. First of all, the community had grown, and I had just been in India for 4 years. You know, I was like this. By then I was a sannyasi. I was wearing my wooden peg shoes, you know, very, you know, this a bit austere. And I come into this community of, basically, of householders. And I remember they were doing Krishna Bowl, this Krishna quiz. And it was like, right after Mangalarti would be the, you know, the Manajis versus the Brahmacharis. And I was in my room in the temple, and I just, you know, I said, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe any of it. So I told Vishnu Jan, I said, you got to take me out of here. I got to get out of this place. And Jayatirtha had paid for my ticket to come all the way, you know, to the West Coast, and I was scheduled to give class. But before the class time, we were on a flight bound for Berkeley, on a PSA flight, and all I did, I just told someone, tell Jayatirtha I'm going preaching. So that was the beginning of a bit of conflict between the Radha Damodar party and the Los Angeles temple. It started that way. I mean, I left so fast that Dristaduma, who was my assistant brahmachari, didn't even have time to get his beads. And I wouldn't let him go back. I said, we're going out of here. So then I got on the bus. There was about 8 devotees there. And I remember we started to preach in Berkeley, right outside the university campus. We'd hold it. And as soon as I went out there, I started preaching. And I met a boy. And I said, you know, I preached to him, and I convinced him to join. Vishnu Jan would chant, and I would just go work the crowd, and I just would start, I'd pick out the most likely person and convince him to join. So I said, Vishnu Jan, I got a man. And Vishnu Jan said, what do you mean we got a man? I said, there's a man ready to join. He said, we don't need any. We have 8 people, and that's enough. I said, come on, you know, he wants to join. Vishnu Jan said, no. He said, we have our party, and everybody has his service. So I said, well, Vishnu Jan, he's got $1,000. And then he said, well, thought of it, and he said, okay, he can join. So he had the boy at $1,000, and he donated it. And gradually, within a period of about a month and a half, we made about 10 devotees. Just right out there in front of Berkeley, you know. It was like every week I was making 2 or 3 devotees.
Were you writing Prabhupada during this time and telling him things?
No, Prabhupada then came. So when Prabhupada came to San Francisco, he had wanted me to come back to India to take up my service again because he couldn't find anyone to replace me as a GBC. And so when Prabhupada was there, as soon as we got in the car, we picked him up. Prabhupada started talking about Hare Krishna land and India. And I could feel the pressure was coming down. So then we went into Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada had, you know, it was just myself and Prabhupada in the room, and he said, so, you know, what are you going to do? Are you prepared to come back to India? And I said, well, Prabhupada, I'm preaching now. And Prabhupada was a little upset. He said, what is that preaching? He said, preaching means there must be results. I said, there's results. He says, what are those results? Let me see really what are the results. So I had all of our new men shave up, and they all were completely fresh shaved, the 10 new bhaktas, and I had them each come up with a rose, and one by one they came up and they put a rose on Prabhupada's desk, and they offered their obeisances, dandavats, and then they sat down and Prabhupada started to beam, and he said, this is preaching. He was so happy to see this. He said, so you stay here. He approved of it. Then we had him come down. He came in the bus and had darshan of Sri Sri Radha Damodar. And, basically that was the instruction I got in India was get a van with some brahmacharis and do book distribution. So I just expanded on it. By within a year and a half, we had 8 buses and 40 maxi vans and 150 sannyasis and brahmacharis.
So when I joined Vishnu Jan, he was every day. He's a very famous devotee. Even now, many of the melodies which our movement does in kirtans, he made these melodies. Prabhupada was so fond of his kirtan that he said that when Vishnu Jan would sing, I would be walking and I would think, I am not in this material world. I am walking in Vaikuntha. And it's a fact. His melodies were out of this. They're just coming from heavenly planets. They're so celestial. Very special devotee. So, he was very sweet and I was very heavy. It was just like a chutney, Chutney, they say about a chutney that it's too sweet to resist but too hot to handle. So, the combination was very good. It was like that. So we were like a Krishna conscious chutney. And we would go out and play every day our music. He would play the harmonium, I'd play the drums, some boys would play the kartals. And we, started to make devotees. Of course, Vishnu Jan, he had his deities of Radha and Damodar, which were very nice deities. And I have tried to tell something about that in a book called The Servant and the Servant. Anyway, these were beautiful Radha and Krishna deities, which we would travel with in a bus. There are many nice pastimes that happened because Prabhupada gave these deities the name Damodar, because Krishna's form, Krishna when he was a small child, his mother tried to tie him up with ropes. He got the name Damodar, which means one who is tied with ropes of love. So when we got these deities of Radha and Krishna, Vishnu Jan Swami got these deities of Radha and Krishna, they're made of metal deities, so that they had to be tied because when we would move in the bus, naturally the deities had to be secured. So Prabhupada gave them the name Radha Damodar. Well, one time someone saw us when we were doing an arti, and Radha and Damodar was there in the bus, and the people saw us waving the arti lamp in front of the deities, and they thought that they were little children and that we were torturing them. So they immediately called the police, and the police stormed into our bus and said, okay, where are these children that you're keeping as a hostage? So then we gave the policeman the darshan of Radha and Damodar, and we said, sir, these are just our deities. These are, and the policeman started to laugh. And then in this way there were many pastimes. So